So thanks everyone for joining us. I'm sure we'll have a couple more folks add into the mix here. I'm super excited about today's presentation. It doesn't just apply to the Southland, it includes all of the state of California. And we have Dr. Emily Doyle with us here today. Let me read a little bit about her bio because there were some really cool things and I don't want to get them wrong. So Emily was born in the Bay Area, native to that area, and she has a passion for environmental conservation. She has an MS in geosciences from Pennsylvania State University and a PhD in earth sciences from the University of Cambridge. And for graduate work, Emily reconstructed climate signals through the chemical analysis of Greenland and Antarctic ice cores. And this sentence is the key one that I was super excited about. She's participated in field campaigns at both poles, most recently with the WAC SWAIN Waxwain, is that how you
Yeah,
call
that's
it?
right.
Ice core drilling project in the West Antarctica. So that's pretty stinking cool. What she's going to focus on today is California state parks and climate resilience. And so California state parks are increasingly threatened by climate change, including severe wildfires, accelerated sea level rise, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem degradation, and a whole host of other things. And so the presentation is going to cover some of the successes, the challenges, and the opportunities to build climate resilient California state park system. And of course, the application could be on land trust lands or regional parks. It's not just California state parks that could benefit from climate resilience. But hopefully these opportunities for building climate resilience endure for generations to come. So we are muting everyone as they join so that we can make sure we have a good recording for our presentation. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Emily for about 20 minutes, and then we'll do about 10 minutes of Q&A. So stay tuned. Go ahead, Emily.
Great. Thanks, Melanie. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Make sure this is all working. Can everyone see that? Okay, bear with me. I have so many. There we go. Okay. So yeah, as Melanie said, I'm Emily. I'm really excited to be here today and tell you more about all the work that we've been doing in climate resilience in state parks. Because this is really central to the work that we do at the foundation. Our very mission is to protect and preserve the California state park system for the benefit of all. And in order to do that right now, that means we need climate resilient state parks, because that really is the challenge of our time and is an existential threat. So if we look a little more at why California state parks are so important to make them climate resilient, and also how they can have a larger role in climate resilience statewide, is if we look at the state park system, a lot of people don't realize how extensive it is. So there are 280 state parks. They cover about 1.6 million acres of land, all sorts of different ecosystems. One example is over 150,000 acres of redwoods. And they also manage almost 1/4 of the California coast. And also really important, parks are for people. The park system was designed and developed to give people a chance to access the nature that makes California so unique and so beautiful. So we need to make sure that they're still around for future generations. And to do that, we've been working on this report for about the past year. You can see the cover page on the left side there. And we're really excited this actually comes out tomorrow, so keep your eyes open. And what it does is it takes us through, what are the major climate threats? What is a climate resilient state park? Why is it so important that we get there? And then also, what resources do parks need in order to make that vision happen? And in the end, it also just kind of highlights how by making a climate resilient state park system, we can actually support a climate resilient California. So as I speak about climate resilience, I'm going to kind of take you through the report as it's structured. So if we go ahead and get started, I'm first going to outline the major climate threats, and this includes wildfire, sea level rise, and biodiversity loss. Talk a bit about how parks can also support climate resilient communities. And this is particularly when looking at increasing extreme heat events, which is another climate impact that's happening. And then I'll touch on parks' role in climate change mitigation as well. So it's a lot, it's quite dense. I'm going to do my best, but I'm also looking forward to answering any questions you have at the end. So to get started, we really have to ask, what is a climate resilient state park? And it's one that can prepare for, adapt to, and recover from climate impacts. But we really need to start thinking of climate resilience as in a more comprehensive scale. A lot of people think of it as kind of one component of what parks does, but it really impacts all aspects of park management. So to build climate resilient state parks, we really need to look at it from a bunch of different angles, which is, excuse me, so there's, natural and cultural resources, which is what a lot of people think of when they think of climate resilience. But, there's also looking at park access, building climate smart infrastructure that's maybe more energy efficient, educating Californians about climate change and how they can help support a climate resilient state park system, and also carbon mitigation or climate mitigation. California has the really bold goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2045. And so a climate resilient park can help support that going forward. And state parks is already kind of laying the groundwork for this vision. For example, they're reimagining Big Basin initiative, which is to rebuild the park after the 2020 CZU Lightning Complex fire. And these are some of the areas they highlight when they're talking about building climate resilience. And you can see that it is that multidisciplinary approach. So, forest and vegetation management, facilities, also education and stewardship, partnerships, and climate mitigation. So again, their goal is actually to become the first climate neutral state park. And so we can kind of keep this in mind as, we go through and to discuss this, multidisciplinary approach that's so essential. So now I'm going to get into the threats that we cover. And I feel like if you ask pretty much anyone in California, one of the first things that's going to come to mind is wildfires. And so as we all know, we're seeing an increase in the frequency, size, and severity of wildfires. And this is due to climate change and then the buildup of fuel from over 150 years of fire suppression, which began with the banning of Native American burning practices. And it's not just the increased area of burn that we're seeing. Fire suppression shows that we actually need more fire on the ground. It's really the severity and the frequency that is leading to these catastrophic effects that we're seeing. So for example, here's an image of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park after the Castle Fire in 2020. And these giant sequoias are actually adapted to fire. The historic fire regime was relatively frequent low intensity fires. But after this severe fire, you can see about 30 to 40% of giant sequoias in the burn area were killed. Another example, looking in Southern California, chaparral landscapes. So I love this picture. I actually saw it in a presentation like a year ago and I tracked it down because I really wanted to show people. It's such a great illustration of how increased frequency is having long-lasting effects and leading to eventually ecosystem conversion. You can see in the bottom right corner that after three close together fires, the chaparral actually transitioned and was primarily filled with non-native grasses. So these are the impacts we're seeing. We know they're severe. We're already seeing them in parks as well. So as I mentioned, Big Basin, 97% of the park burned in 2020. Chino Hills is also seeing very frequent fires. In 2020 is another example, over 60% of the park burned in the Blue Ridge fire. So it's really important, that parks address these threats to really help ensure that these spaces are protected and preserved for future generations. And so now that we understand the threat, if we look more at what Parks is doing, so they created a wildfire forest resilience program. And these are just some of the aspects that this program includes. They focus a lot on beneficial fires, such as prescribed burns and fuel reduction. Traditional ecological knowledge. This involves working with Indigenous communities. There's an education component, building defensive space around structures. And like all sorts of, again, kind of this comprehensive approach. However, it is really hamstrung by the fact that it only received one-time funding, and that included authority from only 5 permanent staff members. And we know that to actually build wildfire resilience and restore these historic fire regimes, it's going to take decades. And this isn't just a one-off. They need sustained funding and adequate staff in order to continue this work and really build a climate resilient state park system. So that wraps up kind of the wildfire section. You're going to be hearing that sustained staff and funding quite a bit. That's kind of a recurring theme and like one of the main focuses of the report. So now we can move on to sea level rise, which is the second threat we discuss. So sea levels have already risen 10 centimeters since the 1990s, and we could actually see up to 7 feet in California by the end of the century, which you can see here. This is data from the report released by the Ocean Protection Council. And at this rate, research has suggested that by 2100, we could see up to 75% of California's beaches gone. So again, this is critical that we address this problem now. And state parks can play a really important role here as well, because as I mentioned earlier, they manage almost a quarter of the coast. So they can really be kind of at the forefront of sea level rise adaptation and help drive these efforts statewide and create a more resilient California shoreline. And when a lot of people think of coastal state parks, they think of beautiful pictures like this. This is an image of Seacliff State Beach. I actually grew up a couple blocks from here. I had my 4th birthday party at like some of the picnic tables. It was Dalmatian themed. It was tons of fun. But we're already seeing, again, the impacts that sea level rise as well as intensifying storms are having on coastal parks. So after like unprecedented winter storms last year, Seacliff Beach turned from this into this. It destroyed infrastructure, flooded the campground, and ultimately the historic pier, which you can see in the background here, had to be demolished. So clearly this is a threat that state parks need to address immediately. And there's a range of solutions of how they're doing that. So first of all, one way is through nature-based solutions, which is when you use natural materials or leveraging the innate protective qualities of coastal ecosystems, which can kind of buffer the effects of local sea level rise. And on the upper images here, apologies, the one on the left is a little fuzzy. It was the highest resolution I could find. But this is the building of a living shoreline at Cardiff State Beach. On the right, you can see it after the vegetation has grown in. And this actually successfully protected the highway behind it from those storms last year and minimized flooding. So it shows how effective these can be. And on the bottom is an image of wetland restoration that we actually did in partnership with state parks in Candlestick Point State Recreation Area. And that's another way that you can kind of buffer the effects of sea level rise. Unfortunately, though, these types of solutions are only short term. Eventually, as sea levels continue to rise, they're going to be overtaken. And so what's really essential is long-term planning efforts. And this is another area where state parks have already started to lay the groundwork to take this approach. They developed a sea level rise adaptation strategy in 2021. And this really includes that long-term planning, including such as relocating facilities, for example, that may no longer be sustainable. And that's a really difficult decision to make. Like the term retreat, for example, even the term itself can be kind of controversial. But again, that really shows how state parks can help lead these efforts. But similarly to wildfire, there was only one-time funding, and in this case, there's actually 0 permanent staff. So this strategy is unable to be fully implemented. And so that's why this report, again, sustained funding with adequate staff, because we know that with the proper resources, California state parks could really be at the forefront of sea level rise adaptation statewide. So that wraps up sea level rise. If we move on to the third climate threat that we discuss, and this is biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation and the role that parks play in the 30 by 30 initiative to conserve 30% of California's lands and coastal waters by 2030. And, you know, California is the most biodiverse state in the country. It's one of 36 biodiversity hotspots in the world. But we know that that's under threat already. And that is what one of the issues that 30 by 30 is addressing. And parks can play an important role because they are found in every major ecoregion of the state. It might be hard to see the little black dots, but each one represents a state park. And just some examples you can see here, you know, we have Jedediah Smith Redwood State Park in the northern Redwood region, Donner Memorial State Park near Sierra Nevada. You see Milliken State Recreation Area. This is in the steppe climate region in the Central Valley. And then we have Anza Borrego Desert State Park, which is in the inland desert climate region in Southern California. So by really acquiring and stewarding these diverse parklands that are home to all sorts of different species and maintain, healthy, more climate resilient habitats, parks can really help protect biodiversity at, a regional but also a statewide level. And we discuss two ways really that parks does this. One of which is ecosystem restoration. So one example of that is you see the Redwoods Rising initiative on the North Coast, which aims to restore over 70,000 acres of forest that was damaged by heavy logging. And this includes a lot of partnerships. For example, they're working with the Yurok Tribe, the National Park Service, and Save the Redwoods League, because this is a large, landscape level project, and projects of that scale is really essential. Another way is removing legacy infrastructure, which is another focus. And this is infrastructure that's now having environmental damage. So one example of that is the Ringe Dam, which you can see on the bottom right. And that is set to be removed by 2030. And by doing so, that will restore habitat access for the endangered steelhead trout. So that's another example of ways that Parks is working to help protect biodiversity statewide. And then the second one that we discuss in terms of biodiversity is parks strategic acquisition. So you can choose, you can protect areas of particularly high diversity, maybe specific endangered species, also just creating large continuous habitats to promote species movement and support increased chance of survival that way. And they can also anticipate climate impacts, which a lot of people don't always think of. For example, looking at potential habitat shifts due to, temperature and precipitation pattern changes. And this can include either adding land to existing parks or creating new parks. You can see on this map here, this is over 17,000 acres of land were added to Anza Borrego. And this connected the deserts of that park to the mountains of Cuyamaca, which you can see kind of on the bottom left corner, this map. And that really created this large, ecologically diverse preserve that can really support large, again, species movement when you have necessary habitat shifts, and also just promoting species movement, ability to move between different ecosystem regions if necessary to support survival that way. You might have heard of Dos Rios Ranch as well, is set to be made the first new state park, which is another example of acquisition helping to conserve land, which is the goal of 30 by 30. However, similar to wildfire and sea level rise, this the acquisition program has insufficient resources. The Dos Rios Ranch, for example, is the first state park in 13 years. And a lot of land transfer to also increase acquisition is super complicated, takes a long time, and there's not necessarily enough staff to get that done. So another thing this report focuses on is really placing the importance of parks more at the center of the conversation around 30 by 30 and getting them more resources so that they can really be a key player in the state biodiversity goals. So that kind of sums up the major three climate threats that we talk about in the report. So if we move on as well to parks' role in climate resilient communities, and that includes their role in access. So acquisition, for example, you can reduce park scarcity. If they minimize barriers of entry, that can make parks more accessible for Californians. And we know that parks are really important for physical and mental health. So this is another crucial role that parks can play. And also the idea of parks as climate refuges. In the case of one example is hotter and more frequent extreme heat events. And this is kind of the idea of parks as a kind of a climate resiliency hub almost that can offer the resources that usually under-resourced communities need in order to help become more climate resilient in the face of these threats. And the importance of parks in this role is highlighted in the California Outdoors for All strategy, or initiative, I should say. And then in the bottom right is also a picture of LA State Historic Park, which is one example of parks being kind of a green space and refuge in an overall urban area. Okay. And so again, this report really advocates for more resources for parks, because not only for their own innate importance, but also because they support the communities around them. And then one last kind of main topic that we discuss is parks' role in climate change mitigation. So, and again, that will help California reach its goal of carbon neutrality by 2045. And parks can do this in several ways, one of which is simply reducing their own carbon footprint, transitioning to clean energy, using electric vehicles, rethinking deferred maintenance. Previously, a lot of the idea was, a building is out of repair, we go in and we fix it up and kind of put it back to the way it originally was. But going forward, we need to think, we can't just rebuild as was. We need to think, how can we make this more climate resilient as we move forward? Whether it needs to be relocated, as I mentioned earlier, how can we make it more energy efficient? Can we transition more to solar energy? And questions like that. And then another really important role is parks' ability to do land management in a way that also helps with this mitigation and carbon sequestration particularly. So for example, the Redwoods Rising project I mentioned on the North Coast, the old growth redwood forests actually sequester more carbon than any other forest ecosystem. So projects and initiatives like that and resources that allow parks to undertake those landscape level stewardship projects are really essential as well to increase parks' ability to act as carbon sinks and help support this carbon neutral goal by 2045. And again, so Reimagining Big Basin, for example, actually aims to be the first carbon neutral park in the state. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the major topics. Again, I know it was a lot, but it all really takes us back to the main question we asked in the beginning, which is, how do we build a climate resilient state park system? And the answer really is that we need to build climate resilience into everything that state parks does. So in the end of the report, we kind of lay out some recommendations of what's necessary for parks to get this done. Again, sustained funding and staff, as I mentioned, climate experts across all relevant divisions. So natural resources, cultural resources, facilities, education, interpretation, together to create this more comprehensive view of what a climate resilient park is. And this includes a robust acquisition program, and also increased representation in 30 by 30 to really recognize parks' important role in conservation and landscape stewardship. So, and we do a lot of, in addition to this climate report, we do a lot of work in policy and advocacy. We're working on developing a climate resilience database so we can really track the threats to parks statewide. We also do a lot of equity grants, looking at climate solutions, and we're also kind of developing a methodology to look at parks as community resilience hubs in face of extreme heat for urban communities, like I mentioned. So if you want to learn more about what we're doing, check out our website. And again, here's my email if you have additional questions. And again, I'm looking forward to answering any questions you have right now. So yeah, thank you.
Great, that was fascinating. Thank you for giving us the high-level overview. And I think you mentioned the report comes out tomorrow. So I'm going to be delaying my minutes for today's meeting so that we can include a link to that report. I do think there's certainly community groups and nonprofits that could benefit from the information you just provided, specifically some of the strategies. I'm curious if anyone has any questions. If not, I can get started with one or two that I had. If you do, go ahead and raise your hand and we can allow you to speak. All right, I'm not seeing any hands come up. So while you're thinking about your questions, you can also drop them in the chat if that's easier. I'm curious as it relates to the acquisitions. I know you mentioned the new Central Valley Park that got created. Is there a strategy that State Parks Foundation is advocating for completing existing parks that aren't yet done?
So California State Parks does have kind of priority strategy that they use when thinking of what land to acquire. And a lot of that is protecting regions that might be underprotected because there aren't parks. Central Valley is an example. Climate, again, is becoming an increasingly important thing. So again, looking at habitat shifts. So pretty much in conversation with California State Parks, they kind of take us through these different priority levels, and we basically kind of help support that vision going forward. So I can also put out some more information about that if you would like, but they do have a priority strategy of lands that they're looking at. And again, climate change is right at the top of that.
Great. Yeah, I think that would be interesting and helpful. Maria, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, yeah, thanks. I had a related question. I work for a land trust, accredited land trust, and I wondered how can we help or how can we assist? What could be our role in that? This is acquiring missing pieces or gaps, collaborating to get funding. So to meet 30 by 30 goals, or just to help the state parks, get buffers or anything. So be glad to have any ideas.
That's a tough one. I mean, in terms of, focusing on land strategic acquisition areas that to support. I mean, another example is basically creating continuity through connecting additional or existing preserved areas. Again, Chino Hills is a great example of that. So I know looking at identifying places where that would be a possibility would probably be beneficial. A lot of the problems with acquisition is just kind of the bureaucracy. So that's one thing that we're trying to address as well. In terms of funding, I'm afraid I don't have a great answer for you right now. I can follow up with some ideas. But yeah, sorry, I don't have a super good answer for the funding question.
Thanks. Yeah, the ones we have right now are through mitigation projects through CEQA or the department's mitigation for streams. So we have a right along the border and southern border, and then of Chino Hills, and then I guess other ways would be through Wildlife Conservation Board if we had a big enough tract of land and matching funds. And if you knew of a spot, that we wanted to go for, then reach out to the landowners, or because we also have the REIT down here in Western Riverside County. We also have a regional countywide habitat conservation plan where they are definitely to have goals to connect up wildlife corridors for Chino to the mountains and to Mexico Valley and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think again, when I send out more, I can send more information about maybe the priorities and the strategy list that they have, which could help inform, where you want to focus as well.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Great. Claire? Good question, Maria. Thanks.
Yeah. Do we have any more insight as to why the Department of Parks and Recreation was kind of left out of the 30 by 30 plan in terms of getting funding? Because they are the biggest land manager statewide as a state agency in the state. And that has just always perplexed me. Do we have any more understanding about that?
I mean, not, I think it's just kind of an oversight on the state parks and kind of shows how the importance of parks is not quite, was kind of undervalued, I guess, in a way. I mean, parks, that's why we really have to advocate for how they can play this bigger role. The 30 by 30, one of the things that we're pushing for is simply to have more state agencies required in the reporting to kind of put more emphasis on state partnerships. In terms of why they weren't more represented, I'm afraid there isn't a great answer to that because they should have been. And I think just their importance overall isn't fully represented, or understood, which is why we're making this case. And by putting forward all this, background information and making the argument for why they need to be in there more, we hope to rectify that. So that's kind of our take from that.
And then I have another question, or a comment, I guess. It was my understanding that back in the early 2000s ishness, state parks, the Resource Protection Division asked all state parks resource ecologists to kind of look at their own particular state park and how they could connect to other open space lands to stop having the emphasis be so much on invasives, but rather on connectivity. And I wondered where that, if that list of connections ever got pushed forward or is still relevant, or does anybody know about it?
I'm not familiar with it. Through my research looking into this, I did not find much information, or I did not hear of that. I can look into it more. That would actually be obviously extremely helpful thing for parks to do. So I hope that there was some progress on that, but I'm not familiar with that being the progression of that. I didn't come across that during my research.
Thanks.
A follow-up question. Oh, Sharon, go ahead. I'll let you do your question, then I'll pause.
Thank you, Melanie. Also from the perspective of, how can we help? I work in policy advocacy in Southern California, specifically in LA County and around urban parks. And I know that many of the conversations that are even happening in the Power and Nature Network and some of the political work that is happening through us is focusing a lot on 30 by 30 and also upcoming legislation like climate bond. So from your perspective, especially as it comes to state parks, is there a way that policy advocates can be helpful or can partner with your foundation to work to uplift parks as a climate solution?
I think a lot of it is, there's the upcoming, as you said, the climate bond, and a lot of we've been looking through different priority level of a lot of the bills that were just put in. I would love to talk to you more about that. If you want to email me about that, that would be great. I think a lot of, in terms of representing parks in particular and promoting parks in particular, I don't have a great example of that off the top of my head. Yeah, I would love to get back to you with more about that. I think really just advocating as well for in the climate bond for parks, there is some, we are trying to get more funding in that. I believe there are support letters and stuff that are going around that we've put out. I can send you more information about that as well. But we do focus a lot on advocacy. So putting more effort into the policy space as well. So I would like to get back to you about that. I can send out some more information as well.
Thanks, Emily. I'm curious, kind of on this theme of acquisitions that's been brought up a couple of times. The system set up to add lands to a state park is pretty cumbersome. And I'm curious if you identified any retooling of that to make it a little bit more streamlined.
That is so, yeah, it is a big, kind of tangle in what needs to be done. I haven't spoken with parks too much specifically about that. I know it is, if we could get more people kind of in-house in parks to help facilitate those land transfers. In terms of specific areas that could be streamlined, I haven't had too many of those conversations with parks. So I think I can maybe speak with Randy as well, who is our program director, who's a lot more familiar with that process as well, and see what he has, if he has some more insight as well.
Great, thanks. I'm excited to see the report launch tomorrow. Is there anything we can do that assists you? I mean, my guess is you'll have social media posts. What is it that you could use our virtual weight to push around?
We do have a toolkit that we were going to send out to people to help them promote the report. So I would be very happy. It would be great if I could send that to you as well, so people could help support and promote the report coming out.
Absolutely. If you could send that, I'll include that in the meeting minutes for today. And then hopefully folks can push that out as well. The ability to create climate resilience, whether it's communities or natural lands, takes money and staff and creative thinking. And I'm curious, Cal Fish and Wildlife got an influx of funding to bolster its staff numbers for about 3 years. Do you think anything like that could ever happen to California state parks?
I mean, maybe it doesn't seem like I think that the chances are not that high,
Mm.
but I mean, so you're saying that's kind of like a 3-year thing,
Mhm.
but that's also one of the issues of why we're saying that they really need to have these permanent positions. Because right now, a lot of what they're doing, the way they're making do is through temporary positions. So they have a hard time recruiting because I mean, people want job security. You don't want to say like, come work on wildfires for a year and maybe
Right.
we'll be able to bring you back. So instead of just, kind of these one-time influxes, that's why we're really advocating for creating and funding permanent positions to make sure that they have the staff that they need. Because also, acquisition, as you're saying, is such a complicated process. Silverized stuff, like we're dealing with recovering from sea cliff and you going through the different bureaucracy paperwork to get that done requires a lot of experience. And so having people in those positions for long term, again, is really, really important.
I agree. Do you have anything else you didn't mention that you realized now that you should have mentioned, and we can end on that, or?
Nothing that comes to mind. I tried to sum it up as best as best I could because it's a quite dense. So I think I pretty much covered, the main things that we talk about.
Great.
And yeah, so again, I'm happy to send out more information as well as people would like.
Fantastic. Well, I will certainly be waiting with bated breath to see the report that you have, and we'll get it around to not only the Southland Coalition, but the greater statewide coalition, because as your maps indicated, state parks are throughout the state and the various regions that both 30 by 30 covers in its pathways to 30 by 30, but in the power and nature regions as well. So thank you, Emily, for coming.